Alrighty, so today I've got the best cards from Legends of the Force for you. I'm going to break down the top 11 cards in the set, including some honorable mentions and a few other callouts. Gonna just dissect all the powerful cards, what I think you can do with them. So yeah, let's get into it. Before we do, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're interested in some more content from me, do check out my Patreon as well. All right, so going to review the best cards, give you some early impressions and deck ideas, what I think you can do with them. The rankings here are based mostly on pure power, not so much play rate. There's going to be probably cards on this list that might not end up being in every deck or being even in any meta decks because they simply aren't supported yet. But I wanted this time to kind of really rank on what I think are the most pushed cards in the set. So yeah, let's talk about it. I wanted to put these separately though. These are just really powerful 2-drops that they printed in this set. You'll see the 2/4s and 2/5 Jedis all over the place, Force users, mostly in Hero, right? Talked about it before, that villain did sort of get shafted a little bit in terms of playable early Force units. Secretive Sage just being, I think, kind of a blue staple in any Force deck. And Aura Sing, one of the most powerful, just pure rate 2-drops we've seen in the game. So these aren't going to make the top of the lists, even though they're likely just going to be played as like 3-ofs and lots of decks. I just kind of wanted to put these separately. The power ceilings here aren't like through the roof. They're just very good glue cards for a lot of decks. The honorable mentions, though, we've got some spice here. I've put Maz Kanata here. This one's kind of flying under the radar, I think, a little bit, but it's a very powerful card, especially in these matchups that are very especially like in the matchups that are Force user dependent to get your train rolling. Maz can take any of your turn 1 plays and create value trades. Just kind of a souped up fleet lieutenant, because that 4 toughness, that 4 health on Maz Kanata is certainly very impactful. I just find it a very useful card in these ground-based warfares. Qui-Gon Jinn, a big bomb of a legendary. He conflicts a little bit with some other big bombs in this color, like Han and Enfys. He does some things better, of course, as he's a bit more of a catch-up mechanic in some games. He can 2-for-1 your opponent immediately if he dies on the ambush. That 7 breakpoint is quite relevant. But, I don't think he's quite top 10, but, I mean, if he's in the 6 honorable mentions, he's like top 16, top 17. So, very good card. Yoda, similarly here to Qui-Gon, is just another big bomb in Hero Green. I don't think it drastically shifts the power level of the top end in these decks. They already had access to things like Home 1. They have what I think is a better bomb than Yoda in this set, also printed, but it's a very good stabilizing force. The heal 5 is probably something that these decks really lacked, and that's a nice burst of heal that you can get on your finisher. Grand Inquisitor is one of the better 3-drop Force units you can play in Villain. There's nothing that special about the unit, but not a lot of units in this cost range attack for 4, and he's also protected. So really nice addition for Villain Force. Itinerant Warrior, fantastic card, 4/4 shielded for 4. Its synergy with Han 2 coming down a turn earlier and kind of doing a Shin Hati impersonation, which we're going to talk about in a second, is fantastic. It's got healing built in. It's good with like Anakin because shielded units are really good with him. Just a very, very solid rate unit. And then Shin Hati, just also, yes, very solid rate unit. It's like the only good Force unit you can play in Cunning in the early turns. I don't know if she's really going to be pushing a yellow Force-based deck, but the card is just very good regardless. It's just a very powerful on-rate unit. All right, let's get into the top 11 list. So at number 11, I put Xian Flurry. This is similar to Timely Intervention. In a lot of ways, it's a little better, though, because that 2 reduction you can actually get on your unit is a much bigger deal than I thought it would be initially. And I think the other important part here is it gives it's in yellow, which means that you're not locked into green if you're looking for ways to ambush with units. And there's a lot of fantastic units that are good with ambush, such as the new Darth Vader legendary. But even the unit we just saw, Shin Hati, ambushing early can be really good. And even that 2 damage prevention might let her keep her shield. Very powerful card. Just, it's going to be very useful at a lot of different times. I don't think it's some bomb, but because it opens or enables something brand new for yellow decks, it's why I wanted to include it here. It's much more unique. It accomplishes much different things than just putting like every best unit on this list. Xian Flurry is definitely an enabler of some strategies, and I think it's deserving of being on this list, although near the bottom of it. At number 10, I've got Mace Windu. Really powerful, uncommon card. You know, this guy looks kind of legendary to me, but anyway, this is similar to Wrecker in a lot of ways. Of course, this is locked behind the Force mechanic, so there are going to be other cards kind of locked behind that. In general, this set does put a lot of power behind that Force mechanic, and you kind of have to build around it. But when you do, this is just very good. He comes in, he's a big unit, and he kills something. And those are the things you're kind of looking for on big 5 and 6 cost units. And he accomplishes that job very, very well. The fact that he also has Overwhelm is, you know, don't take that for granted. Just being able to, if ever, attack with this and run something over always adds to that chip damage. And sometimes hero mid-range decks do struggle a little bit with their closing speed, and Mace Windu helps there a lot. He is going to fill a very powerful portion of the curve, whether it's in the 6 cost slot or often in the 5 cost slot, because I can see him being paired with the Han 2 leader quite effectively, and that is just a very powerful 5 resource play to play a 6/4 that defeats something when you play it. All right, at number 9, Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of the more like vanilla-ish cards on this list, but this is one of the best 3-drops in the game now. It's got the rate stats, it's got the traits Force and Jedi, which are crazy, and you know, it comes down and it has Sentinel immediately. That is wildly powerful for a 3/5 on 3. He can get the Sentinel back too, so it's not like it's a one-shot deal, but you know, we've seen Emperor's Royal Guard in specifically Palpatine be a very good card, and that's actually even more conditional. Obi-Wan always has the Sentinel. This is going to be a very good anti-aggro card, but regardless of aggro, it's just going to be very good because any green Force deck is just going to run this card no matter what. Even if it had no text, they could run this card, which is in very many ways what Ezra, the 3/5 blue unit, is, because his text is almost irrelevant, it seems like to me, in most Force decks, because they don't really play specters and creatures. But Obi-Wan has very relevant text, a very push stat line, and all the traits. Yeah, just awesome. All right, at number 8, Talzin's Assassin, one of the biggest Force payoffs for Villain. Now, Villain did not get nearly as many Force payoffs as Heroes, but the ones it did get, especially Talzin's Assassin, are very, very powerful. We talked about how Mace Windu is a 6-drop that comes in and kills something. Well, this is a 4-drop that comes in and in many ways kills something. Paired with Talzin Leader, it can kill even bigger things if you're able to get the Force twice in one turn, which is not so difficult to do sometimes. And yeah, it's also keeps that Force trait, so it keeps your train rolling with the Force interaction. -3/-3 is a lot better than dealing 3 damage to something, because even if you can't kill with its effect, you might be able to finish it off with another unit. Talzin's Assassin is a big reason why I think Force Villain might even have a shot at existing. There's a few others. You know, I mentioned the enablers early in the 2-drop slot. You do have Karis, but Force Villain definitely was a little lighter in enablers too, and it's being carried a lot by Talzin's Assassin and like the Talzin Leader, I think, who is also a very above rate leader. So if we see Force Villain around, I think in large part it will be because of the power of this card, but not just this card. It'll also be because of this card. And I wasn't sure if I would put Darth Tyrannus here one ahead or one below Talzin's Assassin. They almost occupy the exact same slot. He is also very similar, right? It's a 4-drop that comes into play and kills something and leaves behind a really solid unit. It's mostly the fact that he can often provide even more value through that shield. So if he ambushes into anything that has 2 or less power, he can actually still keep that shield, and then you're really talking about a deadly unit that comes in, kills something, and leaves behind a shielded 4-power unit. He also doesn't use the Force the way Talzin's Assassin does. Now, Talzin's Assassin can go space. Darth Tyrannus can't. They're very, very powerful. It's really hard to differentiate like which one's better, which one's worse. They're both just very good, and together are the main payoffs for Force Villain. There aren't really that many others that I'm like, yay, I get to play you because I have the Force in a villain deck. But between these 2 4-drops, you have such huge tempo plays available to you on that turn, and they're both very, very powerful. All right, number 6, I've got Anakin Skywalker here. Really cool legendary card, and this is one that I could see at some point ending up as like the best card in the set, but he could also be a card that sees not a lot of play, and this can hinge a little bit about whether or not it's possible to play a powerful deck that has both villainy and heroism cards in it. There are some leaders that are innately able to do that without suffering off aspect penalties, things like Chancellor Palpatine, things like the new Anakin leader, Nala Se. There are places you can fit this card and just get the payoff. Often those leaders, though, all 3 of those have a lot of downsides built into them in order to allow you to play both sides of the aspect. So there's a little tension there. Now, there might also be ways to enable this in some other decks, playing some off aspect cards. I don't think it's completely preposterous idea to do that, but it does add a little bit of clunk factor into some deck building. And lastly, how playable is this card if you are just ignoring the ability to do both halves of it? Is it decent as just a 6-drop that gives -3/-3? And in many ways, yes. Like, that's actually kind of similar to the Mace Windu card we just talked about, right? The stats are 5/7 instead of 6/6, and instead of dealing 4 to something, you shrink something -3/-3. Now, 4 is often a very powerful break point, especially when you're going like into like the 3/4 space units that exist. But -3/-3 has its own upsides because, similar to Talzin's Assassin, right, you can shrink something and then kill it with another unit and not take damage back. So I'm not sure where I would rank if Anakin's was only 1/2 of this text, he still might be good enough and fill a similar role that Mace Windu does. He, of course, is also powerful when you play him ahead of curve in a Han 2 deck. So yeah, I could see this guy just getting played as a straight, like, I'm not dabbling in off-aspect stuff. But when you start dabbling in off-aspect stuff and you see the power level of this when you actually enable it, it's kind of through the roof. It's just a better version of like Luke Skywalker, which is one of the best cards in the game. So I think it's certainly worth exploring ways to either enable him in decks just by playing some off-aspect cards, cheap ones potentially, or some self-discard strategies, or whatever it may be. And certainly worth exploring how pushed you can make some of those leaders that innately can enable this, even though those leaders often have their own restrictions and downsides. But Anakin, a very good card and a very interesting design. All right, at number 5, Chirrut here, one of my favorite characters. He's got the same stat line that his leader version from Spark has, but this card is a menace, and it looks a little like, why is this here? Well, because the moment you see this across from you, you realize how insanely difficult it is to ever kill him with any sort of ground-based aggression decks, like aggro decks. You need to hit him for 7 damage at once to kill him. If you have the Force, right? This is a Force payoff, but a very powerful one, and actually, combined with the other 4-drops that Villain has, it does clog up that slot, especially in Villain decks, right? Because they have Dooku and Talzin's Assassin. But in Hero decks, there's less conflict there in that 4-drop slot. But 7 damage all at once. Very difficult to do on turn 3. If you have any other force unit in play and you have that token, and they want to attack into him, they have to then let you get the force back with that other unit, and then bam, all of a sudden it's online again. So right, they have 2 4-power units. They attack for 4, you reduce by 2. Then you get the force back. They still can't kill Chariot. This guy blocks Sabine's leader attack entirely. That is a lot. He can block a Darksabered Sabine and survive. He can force an ECL Poe to not only ECL into him, but put 2 damage into him with the discard effect. This is a lot. The -2 on a Sentinel is wildly powerful. This Sentinel is insane in Force decks. This card is very, very good. Yeah, just wait till you see it in action. All right, at number 4, Kellerin Beck. The text on this card is the most legendary line of text I have seen. It is a combination of Home 1 and U-Wing reinforcements. It's kind of like a mashup. I almost read it and like I'm looking for the part that says use the force, but I don't see it. I'm looking for the part that says heroic cards only. I don't see it. This is a 7/7 for 7 that tutors your deck for units. Later in the game, this guy can rip Crate Dragons out of your deck. If you're in like a really late game situation, he can go get a Home 1, who then goes and gets another unit, right? This is tons and tons of value. Playing this ahead of curve, right? A big reason why you don't see Han 2 playing cards like U-Wing Reinforcement is because he can't discount U-Wing Reinforcement, so you just rather play units. Well, this is your U-Wing Reinforcements. He can discount this. You get a 6-drop version of Kellerin Beck that still goes and finds a 3-drop. This scales with the late game. It's good the moment you draw it and play it. It's really, really big. This is very, very good, and it does not lock you into force traits, so you can just play this in your old school Data Vault Han deck. You can go play this in a Rey Data Vault deck. You can go play this in Han 1, where now you have access to not just U-Wing on this turn. You can play Kellerin Beck on your 7 resource turn. You have like 6 copies of pseudo go wide U-Wing style effects. Kellerin is very, very powerful. This probably the one I'm most surprised is not a legendary card, just because the text is so legendary. All right, at number 3, Darth Vader. This is a weird one for me because I think this card is incredible, but I also think it's kind of overrated at the same time. And I know that's a little bit of a conundrum. I put this number 3 on the list. Like, how can I be calling it overrated? The place where I think it's kind of, or the notion of why I think it's a little overrated is because I don't think this like drastically makes villain blue decks busted. I don't think this is creating some like menace that is uncounterable or uninteractable. He's just a very good card that a lot of villain blue decks, especially ones that can ambush, that is usually green-blue, which, you know, we talk about Kira in that sense. Kira's already one of the best decks in the game, and they get a new bonus here, so it's like, whoa, is that too busted? I don't think it's too busted. This card is not very good when you're not ambushing with it. We have to just get that out of the way. It's either ECL, Timely Intervention. Those are both green. We have Xi'an Flurry, which is on this list, and I mentioned to Darth Vader earlier when I talked about it. It's another way, so you can do it in yellow-blue. And there's Admiral Piet, I guess, the 2-drop. He can turn on an ambush from Darth Vader. I don't believe there's any others, but maybe I'm forgetting something. But without ambush, this guy is kind of a dork. With ambush, he's, of course, incredibly powerful against ground-based warfare, right? When you're if your opponent doesn't have anything in ground, first of all, this doesn't do anything. Like, even if you have ambush, he can kill space units, but he needs to be able to attack, and it's very, very slow if your opponent doesn't have anything on the ground. The second thing is, if your opponent doesn't have a unit on the ground that only has 5 health, then you still can't get your 2-for-1 immediately off of Darth Vader, right? Because if his ambush doesn't kill something, then it's really just his ability that's going to kill something. Now, the ability is incredibly powerful. This can one-shot leaders. It can one-shot big ships. One-shot whatever you want. Very, very good. But there's a huge deck building cost to playing this, and that is all the ambush that you need. ECL has its own problems, right? It's 8 less health. You can say it's 5 less health, but it really isn't, because Data Vault has like basically far surpassed plain generic 30 health bases for most decks. So we're talking about an 8 health difference, because that's what green has access to. Green has to give up Data Vault to run ECL, which is a big cost. The other thing is blue-green ECL decks tend to be a little control based and a little susceptible to getting pressured early. So you often need to use that ECL before you even get to 6 resources with things like Lone Pike, Devastating Gunship, whatever it may be that you're running in those 4 or 5 slots. So that's already one big deck consideration. Timely Intervention's another, because now all of a sudden this is not a 6 resource play. It's either a 7 resource play that costs you 2 cards from your hand. That's a big issue sometimes against discard strategies, of which I expect plenty. Or it's an 8 resource play. And how busted is this as an 8 resource play? It's still very good. Now, I spent a lot of time talking about kind of the negatives and the ways you have to kind of like account for the fact that if you're going to run this card, you need the enablers. Now, when you have the enablers and you're in the right matchup, this card is insane. When this triggers into like a mid-rangey ground deck that is just trying to like play units and like win that way, and you ECL this guy or you timely him and you're like, here, your leader's dead, your 5/5's dead. Oh, by the way, I also still have a 5/6 in play because he got a shield and didn't take any damage back. That is a wild tempo-based play, and it's going to be very powerful in a lot of matchups, but not in every matchup, right? I think this guy might actually be a little slow into aggro decks, even with ECL, because like I said, you might need to ECL earlier. I'm not sure how great this guy is going to be in like mirror control matchups. Like, he might be okay. Like, he's not going to be terrible, but he's not going to be like as good as the bigger value units that you can often play in those matchups. So he lives in that mid-range killer sort of territory, but he does that job very well. Having access to a card like this in a deck that previously had basically 0 good 6 cost things to do definitely bumps up the power level. Whether or not it makes blue-green villain some like impossible to beat monstrosity, I don't think so. I don't think this like drastically shifts its matchup spreads outside of like making it a bit better into like ground-based warfare mid-range strategies. And it might even make the deck a little weaker into some other strategies, because you have now given up a lot of deck space to include Darth Vader and your ambush enablers like Timely or maybe Xian Flurry if you're trying in yellow, or you're giving up 8 health because of ECL. So there's a lot to consider here. The card is very, very good. I put it number 3 on this list for a reason, but I also want to like express that I don't think this is breaking anything. I don't think this is too busted. I think this is a pretty good rate power level for a iconic legendary to have. All right, number 2, Ki-Adi-Mundi. Yeah, this is the best draw card in the game by a mile. Like, it's not even close. Have you seen the cards that draw cards in this game? They are so bad. Outside of like Dr. Purging, hardly any of them are even playable. Then all of a sudden you get a 4/4 for 4 that draws 2 cards. This is wildly powerful. This is the best card in the set, I think. Of course, locked into Force, right? You can only play this in a Force deck, but it's a big reason to want to play a Force red deck. It's so powerful. Exactly what like hero grindy decks needed was some more ways to fill their hands up. It works well with cards that already existed, like Hammerhead, just extra cards. It works well with Force Throw. And it's just an almost on-rate unit, like almost. 4/5 is kind of like the on-rate stat for a 4-drop. And you got 4/4, but for one health on this unit, you get 2 cards in your hand. It opens up so much for how you can maneuver a game when your hand is just full of gas starting on turn 3, sometimes even turn 2, because again, this works so well with Han 2, who can just, turn 1 force unit, attack, play Ki-Adi-Mundi as a 4/2. He's still probably going to trade with any unit that your opponent might play, and he gives you basically a 3-for-1 value because he drew you 2 cards. This one is not a flashy card. It's not some like giant exciting bomb like Darth Vader might be, or Keller and Beck, but this is just so far above rate when it comes to card draw in this game, which has typically been very, very weak. So it just gives so much to these red hero decks, so much. And yeah, I think this is the guy. All right. So what do you think number 1 is? All right. This is kind of a joke, obviously, but I put Force Throw here. Yes, I'm aware Force Throw is not printed in this set. Ki-Adi-Mundi is actually the best card in Legends of the Force, but let's talk about Force Throw, because following Ki-Adi-Mundi, I think it's a relevant conversation. Now, this is not a let's ban Force Throw conversation. It's not what this is, but I want to explain a little bit about this card, what I think has gotten better about it, and why I think it's going to be a pillar, if not the pillar of the game with the release of this set. So I've heard musings about whether or not this card deserves to be banned. Even the developers kind of hinted that this was kind of on a watch list. They didn't specify it, but I mean, read the room, we kind of get it. And I know through conversations with people I've had that some people think this card should just go immediately. It's not going to, so it doesn't really matter. That conversation, kind of pointless. This is not getting banned before Galactics. But what is the issue with Force Throw? This card has already existed for 4 sets. It has not broken anything in the game for 4 sets. So what's the issue now? Now, there's been one deck primarily recently that runs this card and runs it well, and that is Quinlan. Quinlan is a powerful leader who has the Force trait enabled. It has a surrounding cast of discard strategies that worked really well with Force Throw, and it was just a very powerful, if not the most powerful card in the Quinlan deck. But Quinlan wasn't some busted thing. Force Throw wasn't really suffocating the game in a Quinlan deck to the point that Quinlan was too good. So why is that? Well, let's talk about what's possibly changing between now and then, right? You can say the power ceiling of this card isn't really increasing, right? It still does exactly what it was doing in Quinlan decks. Discarding a card from your opponent's hand, flinging it at their units, or discarding a big card out of your own hand and 2-for-1ing yourself to kill basically anything if you have a big bomb in your hand, right? That both of those things remain true and remain unchanged. So what has changed, and why are we up in arms? Or not we, someone somewhere might be up in arms about this, and I'm not saying it's unfair. So what has changed? First of all, there's infinite Force units, right? So it's not just going to be Quinlan anymore, right? It's going to be a lot of decks that might want to run this card because they can now. The Force units are powerful, and they're kind of all over the place. So whereas Quinlan largely did not even run a turn 1 Force unit in most builds, largely didn't even run a turn 2 Force unit in most builds, and usually only had 1 Force unit it could play on turn 3, which was Ahsoka, which is an understated Force unit for its cost. And then its main enabler was just the leader, right? Flipping into a 3/7 leader, and then there was Plo Koon in the deck as well, but not that dense in Force. And there were ways to kind of try to at least play around this a little bit by keeping your opponent off of Force, which is something you can't really do anymore against the Force deck. This card is just going to be online from turn 1 on, kind of the whole game. The whole deck archetype of Force decks now means that their whole curve is Force units. You cannot keep them off of being able to play this card. You kill a Force unit, they play another one, right? And this card costs 1, so it's very easy to chain into a turn. It's not enough to just kill their first Force unit and then you're like, yep, we got there. No more Force Throw for you, because they're just going to keep playing more Force units. So that is a change, right? maybe the power ceiling of this card hasn't increased, but in a way it has, right? Because all of a sudden it's on all the time. You've removed a lot of counterplay to this card because it's impossible to keep people off of the force trait in play. Next, and probably the much bigger reason that I think this card has increased in power level, is the previously mentioned Ki-Adi-Mundi. Gone are the days where there's really any downside to force throwing a Krayt Dragon out of your own hand onto your opponent. You have infinite cards, and I really mean it. Like, Ki-Adi-Mundi with force throw has basically just given you access to a 1-cost kill any unit in the game ability at all stages with very, very, very little downside. So you're going to see Krayt Dragons and whatever else it may be tossed at your leaders all the time now for 1 resource, and there's very little you can do about it because A, you can't turn force off of your opponent's board, and B, their hand is going to be stacked if they're playing Ki-Adi-Mundi and their hero red decks. There's not a big downside to tossing your own units. The tempo you gain from a 1-cost removal that can kill anything is wildly powerful. We've seen this happen, right? Quinlan can do this, just doesn't do it all the time and doesn't do it particularly efficiently because there's no card draw in the deck and it doesn't play a lot of bombs. But with the way you can construct force decks now, there's no shortage of big units you can run in the deck, and now you have no shortage of cards because of Ki-Adi-Mundi. So it's a really large package of both consistency in curve, right? This card is online from turn 1 on in a lot of games. Consistency in your own card quality and quantity so that you can use this always, right? And very powerfully because you can rip cards out of your own hand. So both of those things have definitely raised the power level of this card. You can say it still does exactly what it used to do, but not really, right? Because you couldn't really throw Krayt Dragons every game at your opponent's leaders before. That was not something you could build around as easily as you could here. You've taken a lot of agency out of your opponent because every unit in the deck that plays force throw enables it cleanly. All right, that's my explanation for why there is conversation about this card. Again, I'm not really bothered by this yet. Maybe I will be one day. It's very powerful. It's one of, if not the best card in the game right now. But there's always going to be a best card in the game. So it's whether or not this is doing something so egregiously unfun that it should go. And, I don't know. Like, I don't like to speculate on that. I just want to, explain it without really picking a side here, if that makes sense. It is what it is. You got to prepare for this card. It's much more difficult to play around it. You still need to hold on to low-cost cards often, and there's going to be games that just feel bad, right? Your opponent goes turn 1 force unit and then goes force throw, and you just kind of lose. That's going to happen in games. I promise you that's going to happen to you. It's not going to feel great, but that's just what it is, right? You can't really control your resourcing that well early in a game, and you can get pinched really hard by this when your opponent draws 2 in the first couple turns of the game. It's just that those are the turns that's very difficult to maneuver around, and it's something that wasn't really accessible earlier because there really weren't that many early force units that could be run realistically in decks. They just weren't very good, right? At best case, you saw a Grogu or an Anakin in a Quinlan deck, and neither of those units are particularly powerful. So you could kill them or work around it. Or, sometimes you got, but now you're just going to get got a lot more. So yeah, force throw. This was my chance to kind of talk about this card, why I think it's going to be a major pillar. But the true number 1 of this set, it's Ki-Adi-Mundi, in large part because what he does with force throw, but also just he is by far the best card draw card in the game now, not close, and I expect to see him a lot. All right, let me know what you think of my list. Let me know what you think of force throw. Try to keep it respectful in the comments. But yeah, until next time, take care.